Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Barfuss from Maricopa County Community College PD in Arizona. 25 years total in law enforcement. He's also a graduate of the FBI National Academy. Welcome to the show, Chief Barfuss. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Paige.
Of course, I'm looking forward to it. I've said this time and time again, but anytime I have the opportunity to interview someone from Arizona, it lights me up because I'm born and raised here. So it's always really fun to highlight and showcase some local agencies. So thank you for being here. Give us a little bit of background. So 25 years. I think you said that previous to Arizona, you were in Utah. So give us a little bit insight
Was.
into who you are.
Sure, thank you. I started my career in the Salt Lake metro area in 2001 and immediately got to enjoy the opportunity to work through the Winter Olympics, which was an interesting opportunity to see the planning and the training and the requirements of the entire state's public safety to host such an event. Through my career, I got to enjoy about every opportunity that I sought out, and I was blessed to work for an agency with multiple opportunities. My career took me through the investigations route, specifically in special victims, representing children that were taken advantage of and preyed upon. And then it led to other assignments, leading homicide and SWAT teams and everything that you envision when you think of law enforcement. One of the big changes was I spent most of my time in the Salt Lake metro area working municipal policing. But at a certain point, I was offered an opportunity to lead a small Division I university in southern Utah, where I became a chief of police for my first time. And that opened my eyes up to what the challenges that administrators face daily without the community or even your officers knowing or understanding some of the issues that are within a police department, and also things that you just cannot share, but really impact how you lead and how you direct an agency forward.
I find to be really interesting is that a lot of times and I think we're all guilty of this, where we judge other people's decisions or other roles because we don't have an understanding of the ins and outs and the intricate challenges that each role has. And then as we start to step in it and kind of, walk a mile in their shoes, we're like, oh, I understand now. And then we almost feel bad, because we were so judgmental of those things. What was maybe one thing that you learned as you started to promote and become, more involved in an administrative role that maybe most people don't know or would be interested to learn?
One of the most interesting lessons learned through my career is early on in my law enforcement career, I was asked to join the FOP and be on the local board. And every process and every rank and every assignment I've had, I thought I knew and understood how best to run that assignment or how best to uh, help others in the department. And it's not until you get into the leadership roles and the responsibilities and knowing and understanding the behind the scenes discussions and the personal effects of your officers that you start to understand and see why decisions are made. And it's not until years after the fact that you can appreciate and understand those individuals that may have, in your mind, affected you or your career in a negative way. And so I try to remember that as I'm making decisions or as I'm trying to lead and direct an agency. The difficult thing is you can't give all the information. You can't explain all the facts most of the time. And so that was the largest takeaway is give some grace and hope that they have your best interest at heart.
Mm. I had someone recently, and it was on this podcast, and it really stuck with me. They said, assume positive intent always. And I really liked that because if we lead with that and we look at the people who we work beside and we say, I don't understand the decision that they're making right now, but I'm assuming that they have positive intent and that they're
Right.
not trying to do this to harm me or, to make people mad. I don't think anyone wants to do that. And so I really liked this idea of how can we give people grace? How can we assume positive intent unless otherwise, proven otherwise. But I think human nature,
Right.
sometimes we immediately jump to the opposite of that sometimes.
Right. And we want to receive that as well. We want others to assume that we have positive intent on their behalf.
Mhm.
And it's more difficult when it's you being required to provide that to others, if it may impact you in what you perceive a negative way.
Yeah, 100%. You came in, you've now been a chief for four different agencies, correct? And
Correct.
there were a few of those where you came in to help with some cultural issues. How, as a chief, do you come into an organization and how do you fix a broken culture or a culture that has challenges? What are some of the strategies that have worked for you?
Well, it's difficult because every single agency has a completely different culture, a completely different officer climate, or a feeling as you join it. All four agencies that I've been blessed to uh, join and work for as their chief have been completely different. And so the life lessons and the professional experiences differ. All four of these agencies have had some kind of crisis or some kind of difficulty, in that I've come into all four from the outside. So I haven't been brought up in an agency and eventually obtained the rank of chief. But that also gives you a great opportunity. It gives you an opportunity to have fresh eyes and to have first understanding from everybody impacted. And so one of the things that I've been intentional with at all four agencies is to come in with the desire to learn and to take as much time as possible before jumping straight into the decision making that impacts your operations or your personnel in a way that impacts their schedules or impacts them financially or impacts their family and their work life balance. So, one of the key things I've done multiple times is I take time in my first 3 to 6 months to try to ride with every officer or meet with every officer outside of the office. And I don't come with a script. I don't come with questions. I simply want to know about their family. I want to know about them. I want to know what their professional goals are and their expectations of me. And I need to retract that. I do have one question that I end every ride along or meeting with, and that's, if you were me coming into this organization not knowing anything, what would you want to know?
Mm.
And you find out all kinds of stuff.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure we could spend a whole podcast on some of the answers that you've received from that question.
Yeah,
But what a great question, because it really opens up the door for each individual to voice what they know and what they think that they want you to know. And I'm sure that they're leading with the most important thing. If they have one thing that you should know, it's going to be what's most important to them.
right.
Wow, that's
And it's
cool.
important not to write it down, because you keep mental notes and then you write down after the fact, but you want it to be an organic conversation that demonstrates your ability and your intent, that you want to listen, learn, and take away as much as possible during those brief interactions, because you don't get many of them once you get rolling.
Yeah. Do you also take the opportunity to let them get to know you? Is there kind of open dialogue and, is that an approach for you? I see you shaking your head yes, but
Yeah,
to, let them get to know you as a person too, not just as chief.
I try. Obviously, when the new guy comes in and the walls
Mhm.
are up, it's hard to
Yeah.
have a fully transparent and trusting relationship. And the goal is to leave those opportunities of meeting your officers and your command staff in a way that breaks down the wall just a little bit. It's not going to come crumbling down, and they're not going to trust you after one meeting, but it needs to set the stage that that is the expectation, and that's the goal, is to open up discussion and just realize that everybody that we're dealing with has their own story. They have their own challenges and their own difficulties, and they have their own desires.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to recognize the human element of everything that we're talking about. At the end of the day, we're dealing with humans, and to understand the unique intricacies of each person. I did want to ask you because I saw in your bio a couple cool things, but what is one thing that someone would be maybe surprised to know about you, not chief you, but you as a human?
I might surprise a lot of people. One, I'm a girl dad. I have three daughters. Um, so recently, having two of them married and bringing on two sons-in-law, that's been a whole new experience for me. But I always envisioned I'd be the coach dad. I'd be involved in the soccer or the softball. And my daughters chose dance, cross country, marching band, and all the things that you just have to take a step back and support them in. And so the interesting thing about me is I was a marching band dad for a little time, and it's just just those experiences that I think people don't understand is every person in this profession and everyone that we support and deal with in our communities has stories. And we're all humans in some way outside of our profession. And so that's the thing that might catch them off guard a little bit.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. I'm actually expecting my first baby right now.
Awesome.
And we had a very similar experience. So if I was a betting person, I would have bet all of my money, every last cent of my money, that we were having a boy. Like I just thought I was so in tune with my intuition. I was like, this is a boy for sure. No doubt in my mind. Had a boy name picked out. And then to our surprise, we found out we were having a little girl. And my fiance looked at me and he was like, "What do I do?" Because in his mind, same
Awesome.
thing. He was like, sports and soccer and football and all the things that he was in, and now he's like, what do we do, and I'm like, well, we're gonna figure it out and it's gonna be great. But he's like, I just think it was so funny. He's like, I don't know how to raise a little girl. But then he started talking to his friends and everyone who has little girls, and they were saying that it's the best to be a girl
It
dad.
is.
So I
It
think that
is.
that's a really cool thing for you to share, so thank you. And I related to that too. So um, you have a really interesting leadership philosophy. Can you dive into that a little bit for us?
There's a number of leadership quotes and lessons and things to learn, but one of the key things that I emphasize and have hit lately is a little bit of a equation from Jimmy Johnson, who was a Super Bowl coach and a college national champion coach. And on his wall in his office, he had an equation that said PA plus E equals P. And a lot of people asked what that meant. And that was intentional. He wanted people to know what that meant. So his equation was personal attitude plus effort equals performance. And that was geared to all these high performing individuals that he equates to what's the difference in an NFL player when they're all God gifted, they're all extreme athletes. There's not a big difference athletically, but it comes down to attitude and effort, which
Mhm.
ultimately impacts their performance. And so I've changed that and added one more A. So I put PA squared plus E equals P. And so to me and for my command staff, they've heard this endlessly, but it's personal attitude and accountability plus effort equals performance, whether it's individual or team. So the goal is we have to focus on ourselves and actually be what we're trying to create in others and support and develop. And if we're not having good attitudes, if we don't have accountability, if we don't put forth the effort, then everyone's going to see that our performance is lacking and that that's acceptable as an organization.
Mhm.
So PA squared plus E equals P, and that's something that's uh, grilled into my lieutenants and my sergeants.
I love it. I think it's twofold too. It's, how as individuals can we try to live that? How can we self-assess? How can we ask ourselves those questions of, am I having a positive attitude? Am I taking accountability where needed? Is my performance where it should be? And asking us ourselves those questions. Am I putting in the right amount of effort, or am I going above and beyond, in some cases, or am I kind of like phoning it in, And so I think as individuals, we can take that and we can ask ourselves that. But then as an organization, I know you said it's grilled into your leadership team, but how do you as an organization continue to instill that message and, set those standards and motivate and encourage people to live by that or to take action in, themselves and in their performance?
Right. We hear all the time that everybody, regardless of rank, is a leader, and that's absolutely true.
Mm.
But if those in leadership roles are not matching the standards that are expected or even requested, then you're not going to succeed in any way. One of the things that I did at a previous agency, we did the stats and the analysis, and we realized that in our agency, about 85% of all calls of service were vehicle accidents. And over the calendar year prior to that, our significant injury accidents for running red lights had increased over 70%. So as a chief, I spent 2 weeks, went through motor school, which beat me up physically, but I was extremely happy to pass. And then I would go out and I'd ride 2 days of my work week with my motor unit to demonstrate that anything I ask others to do, I'm willing to do myself. And that factors into how you conduct yourself at the range. Are you barely qualifying, or are you excelling? How you attend your defensive tactics trainings, or are you giving yourself a pass when others aren't?
Mm.
Everything that we do in leadership has to demonstrate that, one, we are part of the team, and two, we expect ourselves to succeed the way we expect others to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes, and I think I'm going to put this in my personal experience. So, um, have you ever heard the expression where they say, like, as soon as you let your foot off the gas, someone else is going to pass you up? Have you
Yeah,
heard this? Um,
yeah,
I think that sometimes we convince ourselves that once we get to a certain point in our career, we've arrived. And it's almost like this idea of like, okay, we can relax, we can chill, we can kind of take our foot off the gas a little bit because we've reached whatever that pinnacle is that we were looking to reach. And I think it's actually the opposite. I think with that promotion or with, that pinnacle comes more responsibility to lead the way. And not only do you have to model for other people, you also have to bring other people up. And you have to be
right,
able to mentor and to teach other people so that they can replace you one day. Because hopefully, my team is going to be better than me. And I want
right.
that. I want people to be better than me. So I think it's almost like we think we're going to get to this point so that like we can kind of breathe and chill out a little bit. And then we realize that when we get to those points, that there's even more responsibility for us to set the example and to help other people. And if you're not doing that and you start to let off the gas, people are ready to pass you up, and you're not going to be in that position that you worked so hard for. How do
Right.
we continue to improve ourselves and to grow and to learn? And then how do we set that example for other people? So I love that you said that of like, hey, like, we have to continue, even though sometimes it's hard and, people are tired and, all the things. Like,
Yeah,
how do you continue to put your foot on the gas, for the betterment of everybody else?
right. And it's also difficult as a chief to have to work around and either handle individuals that promote up and believe they've arrived. Some of my most difficult personnel challenges have been with the assistant chief rank, where they believe they've arrived, and all of a sudden the work ethic stops and they start pointing to the stars on their collar and thinking the rank itself
Mm.
dictates a response. And it's very difficult to remind people that no, you got promoted because you worked hard, and now you have to work twice as hard.
Exactly. Yeah. How do you, I know you have experience coming into organizations and helping with culture and creating standards. How do you think wellness plays a role in culture and um, the betterment of the organization or the health of the organization?
Wellness is an interesting component because if the individuals are healthy and happy and have a unified mission and vision, then the organization's going to be the same and it compounds quickly. One of the challenges I've found is that if an organization is lacking in direction or leadership or guidance, then the individuals are also suffering. And that shows with PTO balances being drained or sick leave being abused or uh, the little things being taken advantage of, which is indicative of larger problems. You talk about officer wellness, and one of the interesting things that I read recently was that 59 to 68% of all officers currently report experiencing burnout or chronic stress. And then we factor in from an organization that 65% of organizations are reducing services or taking away positions, and it's compounding already problematic areas. So as a chief, you sit and you think, how do I deal with reductions in staff or reducing services while also acknowledging that my officers are spent?
Hmm.
And how do I create a positive attitude and a positive culture, not only in the individual, but organizationally, so that they want to come back and they want to participate and they want to do the job we hired them to do while acknowledging they have lives and they need time off to refresh.
Yeah. Have you found the magic wand for that?
No, I think the magic wand in those specific challenges is that your officers and your agency know that you understand the challenges in front of you and you're doing everything you can to address the issue with the realization that sometimes we won't be totally successful, but if we make small changes and small improvements, then we're still making progress. And that's the mindset and the mentality that I try to push with everybody that I work with and for is our own verbiage can impact our wellness. And when I hear people say, oh, we've got issues and I can't stand this and we've got problems, one of the things I've worked heavily with my command staff, especially currently, is changing the verbiage from problems and issues to opportunities. It sounds stupid, but look at the many opportunities that we have to fix this process or this system, and how will it better our officers? And so simple things like frauds that are redundant and mind numbing and make our officers go crazy. If we can strategically change that systematically and take that burden off of them, then we're improving wellness.
Yeah, I agree with you that the way we present things is important. And sometimes it does take something small, like what you just said, of instead of saying challenges, saying opportunities, to flip the script a little bit. Perception is everything, and if we go, and I use this with my team too, where it's not you did something wrong, it's this is a training opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to do better. And
Right.
I think that that mental shift matters. But would it be fair for me to say that your approach and your strategy with culture and wellness is really to start with leadership, making sure everyone's on the same page, but then also making sure that there's effective communication and transparency with the things that you're trying to accomplish. And if you can't accomplish something, you have those open lines of communication that trickle down within the organization to help things move forward.
Yeah, one of the things that I complained about as an officer and all the way through the ranks, and I still hear, is lack of communication, lack of transparency, and it's a constant challenge. And we have to be aware that the perception of not sharing all the information comes across as us withholding or keeping information away, when the truth is we just simply can't address all things that are currently going on, whether it's a legal obligation or a personal obligation. And so I think the communications and the transparency topic is absolutely vital because it hasn't changed in my 25 years. And I think we often forget, being at the top, what it looks like to our officers that we're not being transparent or communicating effectively. And that's the constant opportunity that we have to self correct.
Yeah. I had a chief yesterday. He had a coffee cup and it was like a little diner or a restaurant. And he is like, "Do you know why I drink out of this coffee cup every day?" I was like, "I have no idea." Like we just met. I have no idea. And he goes, "Because this was my very first job." He's like, "And it reminds me of where I came from, and it keeps me grounded and it keeps me humble." And I think it is important for us to remember, how did we feel? Where did we come from? Remember the effort it took, remember the challenges, remember the failures, because sometimes when you're at the top and you're feeling real successful, you forget the struggle that it took to get there and understanding that there are other people who are now walking in those same footsteps. So
Hmm.
having that empathy and that emotional intelligence to understand that other people are going through what you went through. But I thought it was a really cool thing for him to say of like, yeah, I just try to remember myself or remind myself every day of where I came from, how I got started, even before I was in law enforcement, the challenges and it just keeps me grounded. And I think we do have to remember what it felt like in certain seasons of our life. And for you to say that of like, hey, I remember being a young officer and how frustrating it was that there wasn't communication and transparency. Now, as chief of police, it's something that you value and you try to make sure that you have that with your team so that they don't ever question what's going on. And if it's something where you can't disclose, they know that you can't disclose it for
Yeah,
whatever reason, not just because you don't want to talk to them.
right. One of the things that is most difficult for uh, that I had to learn over the years is having the difficult conversations has to happen. So how do we make difficult conversations more agreeable when both parties disagree so adamantly? And a prime example is how you deal with discipline or performance improvement plans with underperforming officers or even your command staff. And one of the things I always start off with is, I've sat in your seat. I've had a chief tell me, if you're not happy here, I'll help you leave. And he fired me shortly after for a policy violation. I know exactly how difficult it is to be told that you're not meeting a standard, but how you react to this will dictate your success long term. My goal is that you will take this opportunity to improve as we asked you to, and then it's a done deal and the sky's the limit for you moving forward.
Yeah.
And that works most of the time.
Yeah, I think people want to connect on a deeper level and they want to feel understood. And
Mhm.
I think that that's powerful for you to say, "Hey, I've been there. Trust me." Trust
Yep.
me, I've been there. But then also teaching that resilience of, how do we move forward from here? And I say this all the time. It's one of my mantras and things that I try to remember is that failure is a necessary piece of success. There's
Mhm.
nobody out there that is successful who hasn't failed more times than they've succeeded, probably. And so when we can share that with other people, I think that's really powerful and it's really important. And
Right.
I think that there are a lot of people out there who, and I used to be one of them, who will hide all of that stuff or hold it really close to their chest because they don't want people to know that they
Yep.
failed or they messed up or, whatever. But I think if we can share that, I think that we give permission to other people to take risks. So people are
Right.
so afraid of failure that they don't even try anymore, and they just give up. And I've had a lot of conversations with my team about that of like, we can work through tripping and falling. We can work
Right.
through the failures, as to your point, how we respond to that, how we keep moving, how we improve, how we grow from here is what truly
Yep.
matters. What does that look like? And if we as, I don't want to say we, I don't want to lump myself in your world, but as maybe people within our industry, if we can say, I failed, then other people are going to be like, okay, chief failed. That means it's okay. Like
Absolutely.
I can fail too, and I can maybe one day also be chief. So I think it's
Yeah.
inspirational.
Well, I share an example that's recent with a lot of people because it demonstrates exactly what you shared, and that is all all four different agencies where I've been a chief have been completely different, and I've learned a lot. But my third agency, I went into as an outsider, and I was dealing with a strong mayor that was extremely difficult, that had ethical issues and challenges. And at 10 months, I put everything down on paper and I had to either draw the line of where I stood, knowing that the real possibility would be that I would be fired. And I was the very next day.
Mhm.
And it's okay as a chief, as an officer, as a lieutenant, or whatever your rank, to have that ethical line, stand behind it, because the day I was fired was the first time I slept in 10 months. And people need to know that. I think administrators, specifically in law enforcement, are so caught up in maintaining either the position or the title or appeasing everybody that we have to realize we have to stand by our own values and our own ethics and our own standards. And we have to walk the walk just like we ask everybody else to. And
Mhm.
when you share those examples, all of a sudden they realize it's not a chief in front of me, it's another person that understands. And if he's willing to do it, then maybe I should as well.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what we were talking about before of how we present things and how we can flip the script a little bit.
Yep.
That's not a failure. Like
No.
you being fired and sleeping 10 months and wait, or excuse me, sleeping for the first time in 10 months, waking up and feeling good about yourself
Yep.
because you held true to your values, that's a win,
Yep.
and that got you to where you are now. And now you get to help other people and you get to relate to other people who are going through hard times and you get to be the inspiration for them to keep moving. I think when we look at these things, I think people are so afraid of failure, maybe because it's the word or the stigma that's
Mhm.
associated with failure.
Yeah.
Maybe we can change the word failure to growth, like
Yeah.
because I truly believe that like from every hard thing that we go through is an opportunity for growth. And so are we less afraid of growth? Probably. So maybe instead of calling it a failure, we called it a growth opportunity or, a chance for
Yeah.
growth. So I like
Well,
it.
it's also a fit for culture. I mean, that those 10 months, it was the worst 10 months of my career. I knew it was not a good fit. I knew I wasn't being successful in my role. And everybody else, I think you can, for yourself, know when you are failing. And I think the power in owning your position and owning your standards and owning where you go is it's not a failure if you understand your risk and you're happy with the outcome. And at the end of the day, I found a better fit. I found a better culture. I found a better opportunity for me, not understanding that that was ahead. And
Yeah,
so the end message for everybody going into wellness is we are in charge of our careers. We're in charge of our futures. And if we don't take care of ourselves, then we can't take care of others.
100%. Yeah, and I think that that's a really important thing. And I think sometimes, and I've done this too, everything we talk about on this podcast, I'm like guilty of doing all these things. So it's not a judgment at
Yeah.
all. But
Same.
I think that so often we forget how much control we actually have over our success. And when it comes to wellness specifically, we can spend all day long saying that we work too much. We don't have the time. We don't have the energy. We don't have the resources. We don't have. Or we can say, you know what, I'm responsible for this. And if I'm tired, I'm going to make time. I'm going to make sure that I can fit this in. I'm going
Right.
to make sure that I take control over my own health and wellness, even if the organization is not providing the resources for me to be successful. How do we take our own lives into our own hands and start
Right.
taking those steps? And I think we forget that, yeah, it would be great if everything was provided to us and everything was easy, but that's not
Right.
always life or reality. And so we have to take it upon ourselves to make positive changes and to be disciplined and to create those habits that are going to set us up for success.
Right. One of the things that I always stand behind is what can I control? And
Yes.
if I can't control it, how much of my effort or frustration or physical health am I going to put into something that I have absolutely no ability to change?
Yep.
And so when officers complain about pay or about schedules or about things that are completely out of their control and maybe even out of mine, I have to bring it back and say, what can you control? Focus on that and move forward, as uncomfortable as it can be. And the same as with education. I tell everybody there's never a good time to go to school and get your education. There's never a good time to promote. My wife reminded me of that when I chose not to apply for the sergeant rank my first time. And she said, actually, when are you going to do it? And
Mhm.
challenged me. And she goes, there's never a good time, just like you said with education. So she called me out on my own standard. And that's something that we have to acknowledge and move forward with. Control what we can control.
I agree. And how lucky are you to have someone who's going to hold you accountable too? I have
Oh, she
my
does.
fiance that does that too, and I so appreciate it, and I think
Yeah.
who we choose to be in our circle is very important. And do we have people who want us to succeed, but do we also have people who are going to hold us accountable to those things? And I've had my spouse do the same thing where he's like, "You teach this stuff." He's like, "You are not responding well right now. Take a breath," or, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're right." Like, and so it's really lucky for us to have that. But I agree with you. Control the controllable always. Take your own wellness into your own hands. Make sure that you're putting forth the effort for yourself because you matter. My final question for you, and I feel like we could honestly talk for hours and hours about this, but for the younger generation, what words of wisdom would you share with them that, maybe you wish you would have known when you were younger?
Ultimately, I truly believe that we need to remind ourselves constantly to trust ourselves and trust that we've done the work, we've put forth the effort to succeed, and ultimately we will. If we can't trust ourselves and we can't believe in our abilities, then everything else is out the window. And so, for everybody looking at either promoting or looking at what to do, it's one of those things where if you don't believe in yourself, then you will not succeed. It goes back to an experience I had in high school where I had a teacher basically call me stupid in front of everybody, and it impacted me in a way that I thought I would never succeed in higher ed or even in college. Since then, I've obtained multiple degrees, master's degrees. I've earned a pilot's license. I do all these things that if I want to learn it and I want to do it and it matters to me, I believe that I can do anything I set my mind to. And that's the mentality that I want, not only for our officers or those we work with, but my own children. My own children are so resilient and we believe in them more than they believe in themselves. And so that's something that I wish everybody had.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on here today. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap?
No, I think we've covered a lot of information, but we could go on for days and days and not scratch the surface of taking care of ourselves and our agencies.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on here and spending an hour with me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.